But the truth is, especially when you see how it all came to fruition against the Celtics, who are definitely a more formidable opponent than the other teams they faced up till that point. No, Golden State just was a dominant team throughout.
Hello and welcome to the Wednesday, June 22nd edition of the TV on Basketball podcast with your host, TV. Hope you're having a fantastic day and thank you for clicking on to watch or listen to today's episode. Before we start, I do have to plug my other platforms. Remember to follow at TV on Basketball on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for updates on the podcast and for other great content. If you're on YouTube, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you will not miss an episode. For all my podcast listeners on Apple, remember to subscribe and leave a review. That would be highly appreciated. And for Spotify, Anchor, and Podbean, just continue to show your support in any way possible. I see you all. I have an awesome show lined up for you guys today. We're going to be talking about the NBA Finals and how that concluded. The team finally came out and got the victory. Me and my guests are going to talk about that. The Christian Wood trade, the Kyrie Irving news trade, and also potential draft questions that we have for the draft that's happening this Thursday. But of course, I have a guest on my show. We have a regular. We have Jalon from the Basketball Genius Instagram page to show. What's up, man? It's been a minute.
Yeah, man, it's been a while. How you doing? I mean, look, bro, since the last time we talked, we've seen almost the entire postseason play out at this point.
Exactly. I mean, this entire postseason has been honestly completely unpredictable. Is probably the best way to put it. Even the NBA Finals, like the Warriors doing it the way they did. Pretty cool, especially going down 2-1, but we're going to get to all that today. You know, I'm going to have all of his links down in the description below. You can finally find them there. And hopefully we'll probably do more shows like this throughout the off season. But man, there are a lot of stuff to talk about. Are you ready to get into this?
Yes, sir. Let's go.
All right, let's go. Let's get into this. And we're going to start off with talking about some NBA Finals talk. And first and foremost, congratulations to the 2022 NBA champion, Golden State Warriors, winning their fourth NBA title in the last 8 years, four times in the last 6 times they attended the finals. I mean, this is some dynasty stuff we're witnessing, and it's absolutely crazy to see what this Warriors team has been able to do, basically in 3 stages of their team. I mean, you have the pre-KD Warriors, the KD Warriors, and now after KD, still being able to win the championship. I mean, man, what did you think of their finals run, and what do you think of this Golden State Warrior run in general?
I mean, the word that comes to mind, and I think a lot of people didn't really put emphasis on it until we finally saw the finished project, but it's dominant, right? This team never saw a game 7, even when you had little hiccups here and there, like the blowout game against Memphis, or the little hiccup where they gave Denver a little bit of life in game 3, or it was in game 3 for that series, or it was either game 3 or game 4 for that series. There were little things throughout that time frame that kind of gave you as a fan this worry that, like, is Golden State really built for this, or are they kind of scooting by because there's quote unquote inferior competition, at least in comparison to the talent on their roster. But the truth is, especially when you see how it all came to fruition against the Celtics, who are definitely a more formidable opponent than the other teams they faced up till that point. No, Golden State just was a dominant team throughout the postseason. And I think that's something about their run that actually is a little bit underrated. We've kind of found little pockets of things to talk about, whether it's the playing of Draymond Green, the absurd play of Stephen Curry, the underratedness of Andrew Wiggins, right? All of these things have always been little subcategories of the conversation. But I think their dominance throughout the postseason actually kind of needs to be the new headliner for things, because they kind of swept through the playoffs in very casual manner, which I think looking back at it is actually really odd considering all the circumstances this team was facing entering the postseason.
No, 100%. And I like that fact that you mentioned they never made it to a game 7. They never had to put the pressure on themselves to kind of win the series on the road or at home. Like, they always made it so they could finish the season early and they move on to the next round, or in this case, the NBA championship. Another stat that everyone likes to pull up, they never lost back-to-back games in the finals, so it just shows how much of a great coach Steve Kerr is, going from game to game, making these adjustments. This entire Warriors team, I mean, when you think of the great Warriors teams, obviously the strength and numbers Warriors, of course, the Hamptons Five with KD and all that. You would never think that this. I don't think that you'll put this Warriors team on that same level of talent as those two teams. But the
Mm-hmm.
fact that they were still able to pull this through, doing this with this team, I mean, they had so much pressure on them, whether it's in the offseason, what are they going to do? Are they going to find a fourth star? No, they continue to draft guys to help their team for the future. But they were still able to build a good core, a great team that's able to win now. And I think them being able to do that, like to focus on the future while still focusing on the present, like you mentioned, I mean, this is unlike any other Warriors team we've seen, and they're still able to dominate in such a fashion, basically like taking care of business in the West with no real, you know, kind of like, how would I say it, like sort of like backlash. There wasn't like that Phoenix Suns team that really gave them like too much problems. They went through it pretty easily, and then even when they faced their best competition in the Boston Celtics, they were able to make adjustments. Even with how good their defense has been, they were able to let Steph Curry go absolutely off in the series, finally winning his first Finals MVP.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very it's extremely impressive. If I'm just going to say Warriors team, and again, we got to give them all their flowers, top and down the roster. This is a very good team, and they're able to go through like this road that we didn't think they were able to get to the NBA Finals again. We thought that their dynasty was over, but
Mm-hmm.
we were wrong. We were wrong, and we gotta just give them we have to give them, um, a round of applause for being able to do this. I mean, when you're looking back in these four championships, or any of these teams like that made it to the finals, would you say that this is their most impressive title compared to the ones that we've seen like over the past decade?
Um, I don't see that's where things get kind of tricky because I would say the one pre KD actually might be the most impressive, especially because I don't think that the expectations were there when they won it. And I think in comparison to that one, that's probably the closest championship in the four to this one right now, which is like the expectations maybe being a smidget lower entering the season in terms of having them as title favorites, where they stand in playoff contention and things of that nature. A lot of people were still on Phoenix. A lot of people remember when the season started. Oh, I know everybody was on the Lakers train for sure. Of
Oh
course,
gosh.
even myself was in the mix in terms of feeling like Brooklyn was a legitimate team, and that was pre James Harden trade. Let alone um after the trade when they end up sending him over to Philly for Ben Simmons. Even after that, I figured, oh, with Ben Simmons on this team actually makes more sense. But then of course Ben didn't play and everything else. But nonetheless, like this is probably the most notable team in their dynasty because I think this resurgence, right? You have to look at all of the things that kind of broke right for them heading into these playoffs, throughout these playoffs, right? Draymond was having a back situation
Yeah.
before the postseason even started. We were wondering if he was even going to be available,
Yeah.
right? Steph Curry, Klay Thompson dealt with little injuries throughout the season. Klay Thompson, we could argue, didn't really look like himself at all this entire postseason.
100%.
They were able to overcome that. They were able to overcome the fact that Gary Payton II, one of their best perimeter defenders, missed significant time in a postseason where defense really defined this team throughout the entire run. Jordan Poole was a guy who, at least in this Celtics series more specifically, kind of got played off the floor in terms of just the overall matchups, but he was able to create a name for himself in the early rounds through the first 2 or 3 games of the other 2 to 3 rounds prior to the finals that really kind of put him on the map. And again, like I said, Andrew Wiggins, the middleman of all of this, right?
Yeah.
Andrew Wiggins is the guy that everybody looked back. You were talking about the dynasty being over, people looking at Andrew Wiggins as the trade chip that was supposed to lead to that fourth star. And instead, he ended up being exactly the guy that they needed for these finals.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, on the Dunked On podcast, they had mentioned the idea that Andrew Wiggins might actually be the best two-way wing in the league in terms of his ability to be a offensive threat while also being one of the better perimeter defensive players in the league. I think that's something that to me might come off as a bit hyperbolic, but it's hard to argue against with the run we just saw and the kind of guys that Andrew Wiggins was on, Luka Doncic, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and so on and so forth throughout the postseason. So this team, from in perspective to those other championships, I actually in a way view this one more impressively because of the road that they took, but it might not be their best championship, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I could definitely, I definitely know what you mean. I mean, the only thing about that 2015 chip that I think that has me like just under this one is the fact that
Mm-hmm.
the Cleveland Cavaliers were missing Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love for the
Great
majority of
point.
that series, of
Mm-hmm.
that series. So LeBron had to do most of the carrying. But at the same time, I mean, I would, yeah, again, I would probably like put this as their most impressive championship, just because there wasn't like anyone really like penciling them in for the finals. I mean, when Katie
Mm-hmm.
was there, like they were a lock every year. There was no chance that they weren't going to the finals. Even that year, they were kind of already redefining the game. When Kyrie and Kevin Love went down, sure, Cleveland still had a chance, but I think Golden State's to lose at that point.
Mm-hmm.
This one going up against a healthy Boston Celtics team who had an All NBA first team player, a secondary star in Jalen Brown, one of the probably the best defense they've had to face throughout any of these finals, and still
Mm-hmm.
being able to come up on top. I think has been highly, highly impressive. Again, going up and down the roster, I mean, Clay wasn't really that guy like this season, and of course, coming off an ACL/Achilles injury, Draymond
Mm-hmm.
has didn't really the same impact. But Andrew Wiggins, man, the second best player on a finals team. Let me say that again: the second best player on a finals team after being written off as a potential bust and all the slander he's been getting these past few years. It's all culminated to this moment. Steph Curry finally getting that Finals MVP. It's just a great story, and honestly, this is probably the most fun I've watched the Warriors in a little while, even compared to the KD years where they were just absolutely dominant. This was a fun series. They were still able to show that their dominance when they were able to take over, and especially in that Game 7. I mean, the Boston Celtics went on that crazy, crazy run to start, and then the Warriors, as they do, go on a massive run and completely put this game out of reach. So we saw the best of the Warriors, we saw the worst of the Warriors, especially these last few years, but able to come back at their age and still being able to prepare for the future with guys like Moody, Kaminga, and Wiseman. Again, they could have traded for a fourth star. They didn't. They stuck to their guns. They took to this roster, and it paid off. They are 2022 NBA champions. Before we talk about the Boston Celtics, quick preview to next season. Do you think that this Warriors team can actually sustain the success and be a title contender next year?
So I think they're in the title contention race because at the end of the day, when you have one of the better, if not the best offensive player in the league and Steph Curry still kicking, I think that there's an argument for them to be top five in the power rankings going into next season off rip. Do they lead as the title favorites? I think is where things get a little interesting. And I would say personally, no. And I say that because Golden State has some things that they have to figure out this offseason. Andrew Wiggins is up for a extension. That's going to
Yeah.
be a hefty price. Jordan Poole is also up for his rookie scaling extension, which is also going to be a hefty price to pay. Gary Payton II, who again I just said earlier is one of the better perimeter defenders, not even just on their team, but in the league, I would argue, is a guy that's going to be on the open market. Granted, they'll have his bird rights, but he is a guy that could get paid after showing some significant strides, specifically on the defensive end for this Golden State Warriors team. They have a couple of things that they have to work out the kinks for. Hopefully, Klay Thompson, another year removed from from two, I would argue, catastrophic injuries. Hopefully, Klay Thompson starts to slowly return to himself. But if the version of Klay Thompson we saw throughout this postseason is who Klay Thompson is moving forward, that's going to be tough in terms of sustaining this as defending champs. Same thing with Draymond Green. You could argue that Draymond really only had maybe one and a half solid games throughout the finals in those 6 games. That's one of those things that moving forward, yeah, of course, 82 games versus 16 games is a completely different thing. But again, Draymond Green is one of those guys that really anchors down that top rated defense. And if he's going to be a guy that continues to lose a step while also being a net negative offensively, that puts that team in a tough spot. So I think Golden State, despite being the champions, is kind of going to this summer with a lot of questions. I think there's a lot to build upon, but there's a lot that we need answered early stage wise in order to really get a feel for even what this Golden State Warriors team is going to look like next year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the only really three for sure things for this Golden State Warriors team is Clay, Draymond, and Steph. They are signed up for the
Mm-hmm.
next couple of years. They're going to be here for a while. If the question is, Andrew Wiggins going into the last year of his deal, what type of money are they planning to give him? If not, is there a potential trade to maybe get to trade him off when his value's at an all-time high? Same thing with Jordan Poole. Last year of his contract, what type of contract you can give him? Because, man, did you look at their cap situation? They are like one of the highest paying teams in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing,
It's crazy.
it's crazy how much they're into the luxury tax. And look, the Golden State Warriors have shown over this past decade they're willing to go in there if it means championship success. I mean, they've won 4 in the last 8 years. That says a lot. But
Right.
but how much more do you like want to go into? I mean, like they have to pay like basically $200 million a year already with the current roster assembled. How much more do you want to do like to deal with that over the next 3 years? Like, or do they want to do that? Do they think they can facilitate a trade where they can get someone with that can replace Andrew Wiggins' production, even though we've seen him prove it in the finals? Same thing with Jordan Poole, same thing with Gary Payton, who is actually up for a contract extension this year or has a chance to go to another team. I'm not sure. And although I agree with you, I would put him in the top 5. I think that the Phoenix Suns are a team that is able to bounce back after a disappointing end to the season this year. And man, don't forget about the LA Clippers. The LA Clippers next year with Kawhi and Paul George and potentially what kind of trades that they're able to facilitate this summer, they could be like a problem in the West. So although I think the Warriors are up there as one of the title contenders, it's not going to be an easy road. So whatever lineup they do have back should still give them a chance, but they might have to give up some players in the process. It's hard to maintain teams like this, especially with a lot of guys providing valuable minutes, whether it's in your starting lineup or off the bench. Even someone like Otto Porter, who provided good minutes in the finals, he's going to want a little bit of money. He's not going to take some like veterans minimum once again going into next season. So there's a lot of things they have to deal with. I do think it's sustainable, especially because you have that man, Steph Curry, one of the most dangerous men in the NBA. It's still a question as to whether they're going to be able to do that or not. But knowing the Golden State Warriors, knowing Bob Myers and that whole staff, they're going to make it work. They should be back in the mix next year, assuming everyone is healthy. And hopefully Klay Thompson can go back to his old self. But we've been talking basically 60 minutes about the Golden State Warriors. Let's talk about the team that absolutely did not come through in these final 3 games, the Boston Celtics. I mean, there's a lot of things that you could point to in this finals that they did wrong. The Jason Tatum not playing to his standards, the turnovers, just the horrible offense, especially in the fourth quarter. I mean, what do you think was the biggest reason that Boston weren't able to pull off this NBA championship?
I mean, the biggest thing was that my main thing to focus on throughout that series was the physical play of the Boston Celtics coming into the series, considering the pathway in which they got to the finals, right? Yes, we lament the Nets for how they went down in 4 games. But if you look at the point spread margin for that series, even though they went down in 4 games, that was a hard-fought series. Remember, the tone was set with a buzzer-beating layup by Jason Tatum to steal game 1. Otherwise, who knows? After game 1, if KD and them pull out the first game, maybe we're having a completely different conversation right now. In series number 2, very physical series against the Milwaukee Bucks, where they had to quite literally out-physical them to the point of tuckering out Giannis Antetokounmpo of all people, right? And really putting him in a bind. Of course, they played them without Chris Middleton, and a lot of people would argue that maybe he changes the series. But even without him, that was a hard-fought back-to-back series. And the same thing could be said for the Miami Heat series, where they were quite literally a shot away from maybe not even being in the position we saw them in at all. So this was a battle-tested Boston team that I think just specifically more so Jason Tatum than anybody, I think just ran out of gas when the stage was the tallest. You know what I mean? It seemed like the higher up that mountain they climbed, the less air they had to breathe. Yeah. And it was one of those things where I think Golden State took that physicality that Boston had been imprinting on other teams or responding with against those other teams. And Boston was not ready to receive that gut punch this go around. Yeah. And considering the stage that it was, and Golden State being maybe not as battle tested in this stretch, but of course we know you've mentioned their resume a few times already in terms of what they've seen at this stage in the game. This is a team that knows what time it is. You know, and I think that was truly on display. So one of the bigger things that I wanted to pay attention to was the turnover battle, which did, of course, end up determining a lot of games. But go back and look at some of those stats. Golden State was winning points in the paint.
Yes.
Despite not really being a strong paint touching team, a team that was creating a lot off the bounce, getting a lot from guys inside. And the presence of guys like Kevon Looney inside on the defensive end actually was much more of a hindrance than one would have expected. So I think overall, Golden State responded with the kind of physicality that was going to be required of them to even hang with the Celtics. Now, the Celtics further aided Golden State by, I think, not bringing that physicality out for one more good series. And I think those two things collided, and Golden State took advantage.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you mentioned, 7 games with the Miami Heat, 7 games with the Milwaukee Bucks, and they were able to still, even when their backs were against the wall, they were able to come back in those series, and they were able to honestly like match the type of physicality they were able to bring. And I
Mm.
think I agree with you when the stage was the brightest. I mean, these are guys, everyone remembers that graphic from before the series. 0 games in the NBA Finals combined
Right.
for that Boston Celtics team compared to 128 from the Golden State Warriors team. I mean, there were plenty of points in the series looking back into game 4, game 5, where the Boston Celtics had chances to win in those games,
Mhm.
but it just felt like, especially with that fourth quarter offense, that the lights seemed too bright, especially for their main guy in Jason Tatum. I mean, he had some good games here and there, but let's be honest, this was not the Jason Tatum we knew and came to expect coming into this finals. He, especially in that game 6, man, that guy, horrible shooting percentages, turnover after turnover, just could not get anything against this Golden State Warriors team. They figured him out throughout the series. They have to they have a lot of stuff they have to improve in this team, and I think them being in the finals is good for them going forward and having this type of loss because this is just something they could build on. They're still a
Mhm.
super young team with Tatum and Brown, like what, 24, 25, 26 years old around there. They're still very young. They're still going to have a lot of chance. They're going to have their chances in the future, but I just think that, like you said, they ran out of gas, and the stage was just too bright for them. They were 2-1 up in the series, and they were 5 minutes away from being 3-1 up. If you remember from that game 4, but some
Mhm.
horrible possessions late in that game basically gave up that game to the Golden State Warriors, and they just could not respond since. I think that there is a lot to take away from the season. I still think it is a massive W of a season for these Boston Celtics, but I just think that they ran into a team which, although maybe the Boston Celtics, some would say that they are more talented than, it's a team that's been there. And I think, especially in those final 2 games, the experience showed, and the Golden State Warriors just outplayed them, out hustled them, and just got whatever they wanted. Whereas Boston just got out of their rhythm. Jason Tatum couldn't get into a rhythm, and they just didn't have enough help from the other guys as well in order to win the championship. Good season again from them, but I just didn't think that after that game 4 collapse, we just didn't see any sort of response, which we thought that the Boston Celtics were going to have, because we remember from the previous like 3 series, they haven't lost a game back to back in these finals until game 5, and ever since then we just didn't see that ability to respond like we see in the first 3 series. So yes, them getting there was great. They just didn't seem ready when they had the opportunity to take it home. They just weren't able to.
Mhm.
But previewing into next season, I mean, the Boston Celtics, again, like I mentioned, super young team. Tatum, Brown, Smart, they're going to be here for the next couple of years. They still don't know what's happened to Al Horford, but you still got guys like Derek White, Grant Williams still on the roster, including some of their young guys on their bench. Is there any specific change that you want to see from the Boston Celtics going into next season, or do you think most of this change or growth is going to just happen with the team that they have right now?
So of course, internally, the best thing is going to be that Jason Tatum has to take away from this, right? There was a lot of Kobe embodiment stuff that was going on
Oh yeah,
throughout that time, and of course, everybody got their memes off in terms of being able to
yeah.
get the jokes. Because truthfully speaking, I think that there was a lot of internal stuff, specifically with him. I think trying to be almost bigger than the moment, right? Or trying to encapsulate the moment, like by trying to like prove to us, in a sense, hopefully prove to himself that he's worthy of this stage. And I think he wasn't able to play up to it. So I think it's going to be a lot of internal reflection first, because coming off of this, right? This is Jason Tatum is a guy. One of my hot takes before the 2021-22 season started was that Jason Tatum was going to take that next elevated leap to being an MVP status, MVP caliber status. And TV for 3 straight series, I was looking like Nostradamus for a while. We
Yeah.
go through the listings. You take down Kate, you outplay KD, you take down Giannis, and you beat Jimmy Butler, right? You
Yeah.
take down Steph Curry. Now we're having a real conversation about where you land in the hierarchy if we're talking about Jason Tatum. If you lead the Boston Celtics to a championship and you take down Steph Curry, who we saw ended up being the best player in that series, bar none.
Yes.
You take him down on top of that with Golden State's track record. We are talking about Jason Tatum in a different sphere than I think the way we have the last 2 or 3 seasons where he's the best under 23-year-old, right?
Yeah.
He's put in that pocket. But no, now we're elevated to where does he land amongst the best in the world? Where does he land within that true top 10 conversation? And unfortunately, with the way things happen and the way he quote unquote wet the bed, now people are caused to pause on that. So he has a lot that he's going to have to address to be able to kind of rekindle that flame, because a lot of people were on the Jason Tatum hype train and he took a lot of strides throughout the season. But it seemed like when the stage got big or got big enough, it seemed like he regressed back to what the old Jason Tatum was, and that was a guy who still had a bit of a ceiling on him as a guy that got put in the pocket of just being a great isolation scorer. But throughout the season, he was developing as a passer, developing as a guy who could read the defense and being able to create for others off of that. And that was something that we saw kind of dissipate against Golden State. So I think a lot of it's going to be Jason Tatum. But the other thing is, TV, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on it, it's hilarious that it almost seems like the guy they were missing was a shot creating point guard, which is hilarious because they've tried it with Kyrie Irving. They tried it with Kemba Walker. They tried it with Dennis Schroeder, for God's sake, right?
Yeah.
And now against a Golden State Warriors team where that third guy, that third dude who could create offense for himself, get a bucket for himself, you're devoid of him. And this is the stage where a presence like that could have best really served its purpose, and they didn't have him. So now the question is, well, where do you get him from? You know?
Yeah.
And I want to get your thoughts on that because I think that's so interesting. The guy they had was the guy they needed most, almost, or at least the player type.
Yeah, it's crazy because you were on the trade deadline podcast and we talked and we kind of brushed over this deal, Dennis Schroeder for Daniel Tice, someone who didn't play basically a single minute in the NBA Finals. And Dennis Schroeder, although did not have, the season or the impact we wanted to see in Boston, I mean, that type of player was something that they really needed there in the NBA Finals. There always is this question. I mean, even like earlier on in the season, do they need a true point guard? Can Marcus Smart be the point guard of a championship winning team? We have yet to see that still. I think that in my opinion, I don't think that player is needed. I think what needs to happen though is Jaylen Brown needs to become a better guy on the ball, because if you see this guy dribbling a basketball, sometimes it looks like he's dribbling a football. This guy, the way he dribbles the ball and he just loses it almost instantly. I've seen that many times throughout these finals, and it was honestly infuriating at times. Sitting with Jason Tatum, I mean, it feels like every time he enters the paint, it's a Euro step into traffic every single time. This Golden State Warrior team saw it all. I think it's more internally like them having to grow as players. Like Jason Tatum, we saw him at time, especially late into the season, become a better playmaker. We need to see that throughout the entire season. We need to see Jaylen Brown improve on his handle, being able to maintain the ball, because there's those turnovers throughout these entire playoffs are what cost him a lot of these games. Mm-hmm. And Marcus Smart, at times, yes, he is the point guard, the vocal leader on this team. He honestly just needs to become more of a catch and shoot guy. He needs to stop doing too much with the ball, and honestly trust guys like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown to make those decisions. So I think it's going to come internally. I don't think maybe someone off the bench just as an option would be great, but we need to see that more from a Jaylen Brown. We need to see that more from a Jason Tatum. If those guys can improve on that, I think that'd be good. They're still a young team, and I think that people tend to forget that just because we've seen this team in 3 conference finals already in their young careers. I think that people expect that they're just like these older guys, but no, you got Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, both under 25. These guys have still a lot to give to this team and a lot to improve on going forward. So as long as they can keep these core guys around and work with them to improve on the things that really cost them in these NBA finals, I do think they can come back next year. Now, do I think they're going to be the top in the East? Sitting with the Golden State Warriors, there is some competition there, especially with the Milwaukee Bucks getting healthy. We don't know what the Brooklyn Nets are going to look like next year. We're gonna talk about a potential guy leaving that team later on this pod. Um, you still got the people. Still got teams like the Miami Heat, the Philadelphia 76ers. I mean, it's not going to be an easy road for the Boston Celtics once again, but I think they do have the team that is able to be back in this place, especially with the continuity they've had for the last couple of years now. And you got yourself a borderline, if not a top 10 player in Jason Tatum. So they have the pieces there. They have the great coach in Ime Udoka, who has proven that he is already up there with some of the top coaches in the league. They have the pieces there, but they just have to kind of just put it together. And I don't think they should mess with things really too much. Keep the core together. If they just improve internally, they will be back in this position in no time at all. Mm-hmm. But before we close out this finals talk, because we've been going for a long time on this is going to be a quick preview to next week's episode, where I will be discussing my top 10 players of all time, because it feels like that's all people are talking about now. Who is in your top 10 all time? And I don't know, maybe Jalon will be able to come on next week's show as well to discuss it as well. Who knows? But this is a little just as a little snippet. Steph Curry, 4 NBA champions, Finals MVP, 2 MVPs, multiple time All-Star, multiple time All-NBA, especially in the first team. He's been there like quite a number of times now. Is Steph Curry, maybe I won't say in your top 5, top 10 just yet, just in case you do come on, but is there real consideration for him being a top 10 player all time?
Oh, I definitely think there's real consideration. I think the tricky part is now you have to figure out who a normal top 10 is, right? If Steph Curry's not on that list, and then figure out who's the odd man out. And the biggest thing I think for these top 10 conversations, because TV, you're definitely right, they are all over the place. But yes, things that you can definitely take away from all the different versions of these lists that we've seen is everybody's philosophy for why a player is in the top 10 is different. There's certain people that consider the championships and the winning as more of the influence as to why they're on the list. There's other people who focus on their impact on the game or their overall individual ability as more of it. There's some people who factor in both of them. There's some people who kind of just take, where is your hierarchy from the perspective, if I put talent to talent next to each other, who am I taking? Yeah. And kind of just crossing guys off the list. There's a lot of different philosophies as to how to go about this, but I definitely think at the end of the day, when you talk about the top 10, I think Steph Curry checks off at least a box in some regard throughout all of those options, whether it's the winning, whether it's the accolades, whether it's the impact on the game. If you go down the list of different things that you could factor into why you would put somebody in your top 10, I think there's a favorable case that you can get a couple of those boxes checked off for Steph Curry, and I think that definitely leads to something. This Finals MVP right here, I was one of those people that stood on the he has nothing to prove of the fence, but there were people who believed that without that Finals MVP, there was still work to be done. Now, with that being handled, I think we're able to have a real conversation and a real discourse about where he lands in the hierarchy. Again, like you mentioned, we'd have to kind of really sit down and kind of put the list together, but I think there's a really good argument for Curry in the top 10.
Yeah, I plan on making this episode next week, and I'm going to have a couple of guys on here. And I know that if we have this conversation, there's going to be some sparks flying. There's going to be some chairs being thrown around because everyone's top 10 is different. Mm-hmm. But in terms of my opinion on Steph Curry being a top 10 player, I was on a show the other week, the This Justin show, and I was talking about whether a Finals MVP would affect it. And I would say maybe not. I'm still on the fence of it. But really looking at the overall totality of my list, and I've been like moving people in and out basically these last few years just because watching more of their highlights, knowing more about the players, it basically changes every day just with more information that you get. Mm-hmm. Steph Curry, like you said, all of the factors that people want to make for the top 10 players of all time, whether it's the winning individual accolades, ability, impact, all of that, you can put Stephen Curry into discussion for all of those now.
Definitely.
100%. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, people, I'm in the same boat as you. People were discussing whether was the Finals MVP missing? Was that the final piece to him finally being in that conversation? I really thought he was in the conversation already. This is just a cherry on top of the cake, in my opinion. This is so there is definitely discourse there. There will be a episode dedicated to this because I know that would go hella long for sure. That would go so long. Just honestly, just even with the honorable mentions, just talking about the honorable mentions,
Right.
that would probably take over an hour. But we'll definitely have something prepared for that. I say that he's definitely in the conversation. I won't say that he's there just yet because truly I don't know yet. I'm still trying to figure it out. I mean, like, where are you gonna put Kobe now? Where are you gonna put Hakeem, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain? Because people even talk about eras. I mean, like, people like try to discount people like Wilt and Bill Russell because look, only 8 teams in that era. It was like only 2 rounds in the NBA to the NBA playoffs. I mean, it's completely different than it is now. So there's a lot of things we have to consider. We're gonna definitely have a huge episode on this, but I'm gonna say this right now. There's gonna be some people with Steph Curry on their list. Will it be me? Maybe Jalon if he puts it together. We'll see if he has him on the list, but you're gonna have to wait for next week to find out whether he is on that list. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, once again, congratulations to Golden State Warriors, 2022 NBA champions. Just insane that even when we thought the dynasty was over after the Raptors defeated them in 2019, they're back where they belong. These are what dynasties are made of, and they have continued to win and win and win. Now moving on to other topics going on in the league because man, there has been already some trade talk. There have been some really minor trades, but we're gonna talk about the biggest one that happened over the past week. Christian Wood going to the Dallas Mavericks in exchange for, let's see, a Sterling Brown, a Boban Marjanovic, a Marquise Chris, and the 26th pick. I think there's one more player there as well. In exchange, and then Christian Wood goes over to the Dallas Mavericks. Pretty big trade here because the Dallas Mavericks were missing that interior inside presence after they traded away Porzingis. But Jalon, your thoughts on the Mavs acquiring Christian Wood?
So this is the funny part, bro, is getting Christian Wood is getting Kristaps Porzingis without the expectations that come with Kristaps Porzingis.
Yeah.
That is essentially how I view the trade. Is when you look at the way they played the Golden State Warriors, they needed a stretch big, but a guy that could also make some interior, have a real interior presence, like you mentioned beforehand, and especially specifically on the offensive end. Of course, this is where Christian Wood comes into fruition because, of course, we're not asking for Christian Wood to play heavy defense. We're not bringing in Christian Wood for that purpose. So, of course, we're talking about from an offensive productivity standpoint. That was one of the biggest things they were missing was being able to get true offensive production from the big spot. Maxi Kleber and those guys were not able to really produce throughout that series against Golden State, and Dallas paid for it, right? And so I think by doing this now and essentially giving away players that are not going to play rotational minutes for you in the postseason at all. I mean, with some of the guys, Sterling Brown, Boban, these are guys that were barely playing minutes during the regular season, right? And now we're talking about the idea of what projecting to the postseason, because after seeing what Luka was able to do this postseason, this is the first true step for Dallas towards being able to put Luka Doncic in a championship or bust type situation. The idea that he is truly in it for postseason success now, right? We are beyond the idea of he bumped into the Clippers, who are a bad matchup of the worlds and things of that nature. We are now in Luka Doncic is going for the win every single season, and we have to put him in the best position humanly possible. I think Christian Wood addresses a lot of the needs that were identified based off that Golden State series, and they did it with minimal casualty to any of their roster. If they're able to retain Jalen Brunson on top of all of this, this could be the brewing of something where Dallas is able to slightly retool and look a lot like the same team, but with that last little wrinkle that'll really change the dynamic of this team, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. And that makes them so scary. TV, you literally alluded to it earlier. Like, Golden State is going into a West that already looks different tomorrow, and the offseason hasn't even really started yet. You know what I mean? So that's the crazy part about it. I think Dallas is in a really advantageous situation with Christian Wood. And at the end of the day, you didn't lose much for him in comparison to maybe the Kristaps Porzingis exchange. So it's pretty much a roll the ball out there and see what happens. And if Christian Wood can do some of the things we saw him do with the Rockets, but in a competitive situation, that's great. If you look back at Christian Wood's career, he's never played on a winning team ever. He's never played on a team with real expectations ever. Now he's on a team
Yeah.
that he has something to play for. Let's see if he takes it seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you talked about Christian Wood. The only time where he was actually in a winning situation was the 9 games that he played with James Harden before he got traded to the Brooklyn Nets. He averaged 24 and 12 in those 9 games with James Harden. And now he is paired with Luka Doncic, which if history serves right, I mean, this duo could be absolutely deadly. And look, I like this trade. I mean, the funny thing is, like, with all these Christian Wood rumors that were going on over this past year or so, it felt like the Dallas Mavericks have not been mentioned once. And the fact that they were able to swoop in and get one of address a major need in that team by basically not giving up anything. I mean, there's no need for the 26th pick to be on the Dallas Mavericks. They have higher ambitions than drafting a rookie right now. And then trading 4 basically reserve players. This is a big win. Christian Wood's on the last year of his contract. I think this is more of a trial for him, saying if he can produce on a winning team, and if he does produce, then he's going to get the bag. If he's going to give you what he's giving like Houston in these last few years, he's going to get the bag, and he's going to get like the 20+ million that he is probably like looking for coming next offseason. I think he's put in a great situation. Again, the defense is going to be a concern. They don't have that interior presence yet, but who knows what they can finagle around in free agency. But they got Christian Wood. I think he's going to be a major upgrade already to what they have in that starting lineup. Just an interior presence, which they have been missing throughout this entire season. It's a low-risk, high-reward move. If you're trading away 4 reserve players and getting someone who could potentially give you 20 and 10 every single night, you're going to take that every day. And the Dallas Mavericks, really got the most out of getting rid of their first-round pick. They did really good there. As for the Houston Rockets, I swear we're not talking about them at all in this trade because we are just so enamored by Christian Wood going to the Dallas Mavericks. But for the Rockets, I mean, it's funny because they have 19 people currently on their roster. That's not possible going into next season, so they're going to have some guys they have to release and stuff. I think this is fine for them, getting another young guy to add to that team with the 26th overall pick. And also, this opens the floor for Alperen Şengün, my guy Şengün, to get the starting job there in Houston. I think he's shown some good flashes last season. Hopefully, him and Jalen Green can get that connection. And hopefully, who they will get in the 3rd overall pick. Because I think they have the 3rd overall pick, right? Mm-hmm. I think they have the 3rd. Yeah, they do. So whatever they add there, because he's basically going to take up the Christian Wood minutes, whether it's Jabari Smith, whether it's Banchero, whether it's Chet Holmgren, along with Şengün. That team is going to be young. They at least got rid of someone for another draft pick. And also, they're going to have a bunch of cap room coming next year because all those guys that they traded for, their contracts are going to expire. And then also get rid of John Wall's $50 million contract, which still sounds ridiculous to say. But they are going to have some money to work with next season. I think that it's not that bad of a trade for them as well. I just thought that with someone Christian Wood's value, maybe you could have got something a little bit more. I don't know. It just seemed a bit less for me.
I mean, I don't blame you, but I also think there's certain stuff to be able to work with when you talk about that. Having those expiring contracts is something that creates a lot of flexibility for them. At the end of the day, you mentioned it too, TV. They got a lot of roster spots jacked up. So that 26 pick might not even be a guy. That might be something that they pair with one of their later first-round picks in order to be able to move up a little bit and maybe target another guy in the draft. With that 3rd overall pick, that'll make them feel good. But this is a draft that the further down you get from that top spot, the further away from the lottery you get. Guys start turning into question marks, that's not even just in this class, in past classes. The further away from that lottery you get, the more you are going based off your scouting report and who are guys that are high up on your board. And the higher those guys up are on your board, the more you will have to be willing to make the kind of movement to be able to go up and get them, because you never know if they're going to be at a land. And for example, Charlotte has 2 picks just within the top 20, right? Yeah. OKC has a handful of picks in the first round. I think they have 3 in the first round. Mm-hmm. So looking at that, remember, OKC is the biggest competitor in terms of the NBA draft and making picks to Houston. So what does Houston do to be able to maneuver themselves around, to be able to target the guy, to be able to target and acquire some of their top guys on their big boards? They might have to acquire some expiring deals and some late first round picks in order to be able to package that to move up to some of these other spots. So even if that 26 pick doesn't turn into a guy, even if those expiring contracts never touch the floor, it might end up facilitating something else for them. So in a weird way, it's a win-win despite the philosophies of both of these teams. being completely different.
Yeah, no, yeah, no, for sure. And I think that like a lot of people are seeing this as enough for Houston, like you said. I think that they got exactly what they wanted out of the Christian Wood deal. I think they have a plan for the future, and I think that doing that was able to put them at least like a closer step to what they want to do.
Mhm.
Moving on to the next news, before we talk about the NBA draft, which we kind of mentioned there, I want to talk about Kyrie Irving. And there was this whole Athletic article that came out the other day, and basically it talks about how Kyrie Irving and the Brooklyn Nets are at an impasse for his future contract extension, and that could lead to a possibility where he might not even be on the roster next year. I mean, this is I would say the third situation where Kyrie Irving has like basically not enjoyed his time, whether it was with the Cavs, the Celtics, and now the Brooklyn Nets, and he might be leaving another team in the dust. Jalen, what were your thoughts on this report? And maybe like you could talk about this going forward a bit later, but is there another team that you could see Kyrie Irving being on next season?
Man, TV, this is something I plan on doing either a TikTok, a video, or a combination of the two on before that extension, that option date, which I think is like actually in like next week in terms
Yeah,
of his timetable to be able to pick up that option. And I am so confused for this purpose and this purpose only. And maybe you can give your thoughts and maybe clarify things because
yeah,
this might be able to actually help me understand the
yeah.
situation a little bit more. How much leverage do you think Kyrie Irving actually has?
It, that's the thing though. I mean, I think the Brooklyn Nets have put themselves in the corner. I mean, they got rid of all their young guys to try and create this
Mhm.
team of KD and Kyrie Irving. I think they are put in a position now with this team where I feel like whatever KD wants, they have to abide by. Because if Kyrie
Mm,
Irving is gone, what does that mean for KD? What
right.
does that mean? And they gave away, and I mean everything away in order to fill out this team. If Kyrie Irving's gone, expect KD to follow right after. And if that happens, no draft picks. Once again, their whole future is gone. They got rid of the Jared Allens, the Karis LeVerts, the D'Angelo Russells. That entire era is gone. If you have
Mhm.
those two guys gone, Brooklyn Nets, get ready to live through 2014 to 2017 again, where you're gonna see your picks go to the wayside, not to the Boston Celtics anymore, but the Houston Rockets. So at this point, the Brooklyn Nets, this is what they did to themselves. If KD's like, yo, I'm not gonna be part of this team if Kyrie isn't on this, they have to do whatever they can to keep Kyrie. And now the Brooklyn Nets front office just shot themselves in the foot. I don't know like what's going on here.
I feel you, bro. And I'm kind of glad that you gave that perspective because I think the biggest thing, because if you look at it from the other end of the spectrum, it would be, well, Kyrie Irving's missed what, at least 120 something games over the last 3 seasons. So you would say, as a guy who quite literally hasn't been available, how much leverage does the guy really have in terms of the fact that we haven't seen the dude play a real full season? I mean, really, since he's been drafted, but definitely if you're
Yeah.
the Nets front office, you haven't played a full season for me at bare
Yeah.
minimum, right? So I'm thinking from that perspective, it's like, well, Kyrie Irving hasn't even truly proven to the Nets that he's worth a max extension. He's worth putting in the time and effort to be able to really negotiate long-term deal signings with in the first place because he's a guy that since joining the team really hasn't play. He's the guy that in comparison to like a first or a second year player where we say shows flashes. No. For a guy like Irving, all he's done is shown flashes when it comes
Yeah.
to the Brooklyn Nets, right? But we
Yeah.
haven't seen a full body of work from Kyrie in a Nets jersey. And I'm sure that's something that the front office is definitely taking into account. But you make a really great point because look, if you're on Bulls Twitter and Bulls Instagram like I
Yeah.
am, I've seen my fair share of KD photoshops
Yeah.
in the red jersey, Not to say that he's gonna be in the mix for that, because Lord knows how we would even go about even acquiring a
Yeah.
guy like that, right?
Yeah.
But all that to say that they were a package deal to get there, which means they could be a package deal in terms of how this whole thing ends. And TV, you laid it out perfectly. Spencer Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert, D'Angelo Russell. You go down the list, casualty after casualty to build this roster. Factor in, you got James Harden in and out of the door. Ben
Yeah.
Simmons in the door, hasn't even fully put his foot all the way in
Yeah.
yet because he hasn't stepped on the court, right?
Yeah.
All of this commitment, all of these casualties to maybe see it all falter because of a guy you barely even got to see. I think it all goes back to Zach Lowe's infamous quote of the Brooklyn Nets maybe having the best theoretical super team ever, right? Of it
Yeah.
being James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving. Well, this would be the crescendo of the whole thing blowing up is if
Yeah.
Kyrie is the next domino to fall, because then we know that Kevin Durant is then going to be questioning his situation.
Yeah.
And that puts Brooklyn in a really tough spot. So I think you make a really great point that everything points to Kyrie's crazy. What is he doing?
Yeah.
He has no static here.
Yeah.
But the truth is, you have an all-star caliber player who on any given night is the 15th or better best player in the world.
Yeah.
And you're just going to let him walk?
No way.
It's hard to get those guys. It's easier to keep them. It's a lot harder to get them. You got them in your building.
Yeah.
So now what do? So I think you make a really great point. Both arguments are great. So when they come to the table, it's going to be interesting.
This is what we love the NBA, man. This is type of stuff. This is what we feed on. This is what we feed on as content creators. This is what we love to talk about. And Kyrie Irving is the perfect guy for this because it's Groundhog Day for him. We've seen him ask out of Cleveland. We asked him we've seen him with the Boston Celtics. This is Groundhog Day. It was basically chaos waiting to happen, and now the chaos is unfolding. Everything from that Shams Charania article basically outlines how Kyrie Irving, I mean, we already know that this guy's kind of cuckoo. We already know that this guy's like kind of out there for sure. But he feels like he's not valued enough in this organization. I mean, KD asked for you specifically, and now if you're gone, KD's probably going to be gone. And honestly, the Brooklyn Nets, they thought that they could build another super team there. I mean, they did their work thing with the Boston Celtics trying to get KG and Paul Pierce. That was probably one of the worst deals in NBA history. Now they had a potential super team. They were literally one game away from the conference finals last year, and now they might not even have their two guys coming into next season if all goes bad. And if I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan and I'm the front office, I am extremely pissed, especially the Brooklyn Nets fans. Imagine like having the most lovable team in the league with Dinwiddie, D'Angelo Russell. I mean, everyone loved that team. Everyone loved that version of the Brooklyn Nets team. Everyone loved the Instagram videos and all that. You trade that all away to make yourself a contender, trade away all your assets like you did a decade ago, and to be almost in the same position, not even halfway through the decade, is absolutely crazy. And at this point, we got to put Brooklyn Nets in like that Clipper category where it's like only to the Brooklyn Nets that this could happen. Right. It's crazy. I mean, we talked about it before the show. I would say I might be worried about content again for the next 3 months. If this saga continues, if trades actually happen in August and in September, there's going to be a lot of content for us coming out there in the future. And honestly, I live for the chaos. Come on, let's get stuff happening, Brooklyn. Let's see Ben Simmons, number one option on a Brooklyn Nets team. Let's see it.
Oh Lord.
Oh Lord. Oh Lord, you're right. But yeah, that's the news with Kyrie Irving. Let me know down below what you guys think, because let's be honest, no one has any idea what's going to happen in the next 2 months. This is basically going to be the Ben Simmons saga of last year, now with Kyrie Irving, and Ben Simmons is on the team. So it's just going to be crazy. This offseason should be crazy once again. But before we end this episode, we do have one more topic we're going to discuss, and that is the NBA draft. Usually every year I would do a top 14 pick selection. Maybe I might do that in a Thursday TikTok, so take a look out for that. But we have Jalon here. I know I talked. I always usually ask him in terms of these prospects throughout the season. He knows a little bit more about the NBA draft than me, so we're just gonna go kind of through some questions about this draft. Maybe I might give a few takes on this, but I think most of this is gonna be towards Jalon. But the first thing I do want to talk about, we have a few questions here. What are your thoughts on this draft in general? Because you said that after the first few picks in this draft, it really goes down pretty quickly. I mean, what were your thoughts on? I mean, obviously, the top players in general, but also just draft as a whole.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, this is an interesting draft class because it's been a good little while since we've had a race for the top pick that was this crowded, right? We've had
Yeah.
unanimous, this is the guy at the top
Yeah.
pick, right? The Zion Williamsons of the world. But we've also had, the 1-2 pack-a-punch where it was, is it Andrew Wiggins or is it Jabari Parker, right?
Yeah.
But this is a three-player draft that we're looking at that's going to come down to which player is Orlando in love with the most. A lot of people are pointing to Jabari Smith out of Auburn as being that guy, but Chet Holmgren was the guy that was at the top of the top when the year started. Paolo Banchero was right there next to him as the top two guys vying for that number one overall pick spot. So there's a lot of information to kind of put together within within these last couple of months in terms of kind of identifying not only who has the best projection moving forward, but I think a great thing to take into consideration, especially if you're Orlando trying to build a culture, is who is the guy that's going to fit their team best. And I think oddly enough, Orlando's in a really weird spot because you could argue that all three of these guys address something that Orlando needs in one way or another. Jabari Smith gives them a wing score, something they definitely need as a team with a lot of small guards.
Yeah.
Chet Holmgren gives them rim defense and adds to that crazy wingspan group that they got with Jonathan Isaac and Franz Wagner and all those guys, right? Paolo Banchero gives them a real offensive generator at the wing spot, something that Franz Wagner showed us glimpses of, but I think Paolo has that next level already of, and next to Franz could really be something interesting in the front court. So all of these guys give you something completely different. But TV, the truth is, I don't think we will ever say this ever again, but somehow the Sacramento Kings got the whole game on lock because whatever they do at 4 is going to be the start of the chaos on Thursday, man. Whatever they decide to do, whether it's make the pick themselves, trade back, whoever they take if they make the pick could be the dang decider of how the rest of this draft goes. Because some say Jaden Ivey definitely is the fourth best player. He's
another
the next
guard
best
though,
player on there, but another guard though. You know what I mean? So now you question yourself, and then people say that Keegan Murray out of Iowa is that guy who might be able to play next to Harrison Barnes, give them more size on the wing, a guy who's maybe a little bit more formidable as a guy next to De'Aaron Fox, next to Domantas Sabonis. But you're passing on a guy who people are comparing to Ja Morant. So do you feel good about that if you're the Kings? If you trade back, are you trading back with Detroit right behind you? Are you trading back with Indiana, who's gotten a little buzz as of late as a team that might make some noise? And maybe they make another exchange since clearly they're buddies. You know what I mean? Considering the Tyrese Halliburton trade took us all by storm. So the Kings, I don't think we will ever say this again. The Kings have the whole NBA draft in the palm of their hands. And whatever they do is going to determine the rest of that night. And that feels insane to say about this team. But Lord, man, that's probably the most interesting thing about this class is that all of these guys have everybody, I think, in this lottery space, and even outside of the lottery, we're going to see some really interesting guys be some risers and fallers. But the Kings of all people might actually be the team that determines a lot of that rising and falling, which sounds crazy.
Yeah, and the Kings are going to Kings it up. The Kings are going to Kings it up.
And TV, as a guy, we've done the Daily Picks Challenge. Yeah. And you and me both know the goated phrase when it comes to these Kings, and is that you cannot trust them at all. And somehow the team that we coined as the untrustable is the team you have to trust the most to determine your future. If you're Detroit, if you're Indiana, if you're Portland, right? You're sitting there and you have to put trust that the Kings will either do more King stuff, or maybe if you're a team like Detroit, hopefully they don't do Kings-like things, right? Yeah. And they just draft the right guy. And the guy that you have on your big board, because you already know that you're pocketed at 5, he's hopefully just still available. Yeah. So it's just so wild, man. It's just so wild. The Kings of all people, TV. It almost, considering we're talking, it almost feels right. It almost feels right in a way.
It does. Just like when I saw the NBA draft lottery results and I see that the Kings got the 4th pick. I mean, didn't that feel like the most Kings pick, the Kings thing ever? That they didn't even get the top 3. That they didn't even get the top 3.
after it happened, I literally said I wrote an article that included them as losers because I said the most Kings thing that could have happened is in a 3-player draft, they get the fourth pick. That's the most Kings thing that could happen is them getting the 4th pick in a draft where the first 3 guys are pretty much solidified. And the question is, what's the order? And the 4th guy happens to be a guard. It's like you can't make this up. You just can't make it up, TV. I don't understand, man. It's crazy.
Crazy, man. The Sacramento Kings.
Yeah.
Even when they don't try to kings it up, even the world will settle. The world and the NBA gods will tell them, "Oh no, you're the Kings. Oh, the Kings have a chance to get a top 3 pick. Nah. We got to get a number 4. Make them try to draft another guard after they traded away Tyrese Haliburton. Perfect, absolutely perfect for that team." But we talked about the top 3. You talked about the possibility that each of these guys could actually be number 1.
Mm-hmm.
What would you think this top 3 would go? Like, how do you see it turning out on Thursday night?
Man, so I gotta be honest. I think that the top 3 that's been projected a lot on these last couple big boards and last couple mock drafts is kind of just the way it's gonna go. It sounds like Jabari Smith out of Auburn is that guy for Orlando. It makes a lot of sense. He's still relatively raw, but he's a guy that has a lot of upside on the offensive and defensive end. He's a guy that I think you can definitely plug into this team, and even with ball dominant guards like Cole Anthony, for example, I actually think that Jabari Smith's play style as a catch and shoot 3-point shooter, a knockdown 3-point shooter, probably the best 3-point shooter in this draft class, he gives them a real offensive pop that I think is going to really help them on the wing. And Franz Wagner in year 2, I think could really be a movie if Jonathan Isaac comes back healthy. And Lord, I feel like as one of the Jonathan Isaac optimists, I've said this way too often, but if he comes back healthy, Wendell Carter still on this roster as well. Like, this team could really be interesting with Jabari Smith. I think at number 2, Chet Holmgren for Oklahoma City. It's literally it's an Oklahoma City pick. You take a swing on upside. They did this with Alexei Pokusevsky a season ago, right? The guy that was supposed to be the next Kristaps. Well, guess what? Chet Holmgren is even more of the next Kristaps, right? I would argue that the only difference is Chet Holmgren has a lot more defensive upside. But outside of that, he's got a lot of the similar comparisons to that. And it seems like a guy that I just think OKC, I think especially with like Chet's like on the court demeanor, is kind of an OKC kind of guy for the kind of culture they're trying to cultivate there.
Yeah.
And he helps them defensively, which of course is a plus. And then Paolo Banchero at 3 for the Rockets. I mean, it sounds like the Rockets really want him. Now, granted, maybe they're saying they really want him because they know he's going to be the one left. And so they kind of want to prop his ego up. But I also think at the same time, I think a front court with him and like you said, your guy Şengün, they cleared that space up by moving on from Christian Wood. I think this gives Paolo a straightaway opportunity out the gate to be able to get real time, something that Alperen didn't get because Christian Wood was on the team, right? Daniel Tice, Lord, was occupying minutes, right? And it was really putting Alperen in a situation where he was getting limited showtime, and I don't think we got to really see how his skill set translates to the NBA level. So I think with him and Paolo, him in year 2 and Paolo in his rookie season are going to actually be able to cultivate some kind of real rotational value by just getting the minutes out the gate next season. I think Silas is going to have to, because he's going to have to figure out who are guys that can stick around and who are guys that need to get moved on from. Because just like Oklahoma City, the Rockets are in a situation where, they're working towards building a real young core, but you ain't got all day. You can have 27 picks, but all them guys can't get contracts. So we got to figure, figure out who's who. So I think that's the order that it goes. I think it stays the way that a lot of people are mocking it as. If anything switches, I wouldn't be shocked. But draft night is something else, man. So Lord knows. Jaden Ivey's at the top of certain people's boards if you look online too. So this thing could get sticky Thursday night.
It definitely can. My only thing is, I mean, like, I love, honestly, like, out of the guys, like I said, I don't follow college much, but I'm in love with Paolo Banchero's, the idea of him, like him like being a player. I absolutely love him, and I think being in Houston is probably the best place for him. I think that he slots perfectly next to Şengün with Jalen Green. I think that he would probably be the best fit there, so I'm probably most excited for him. And from what I've read, everyone's going with that order. I think it's probably going to be that order as well.
Mhm.
My only thing about Chet Holmgren, and I'm not sure if you have this concern as well, but someone who is 7 feet tall and under 200 pounds. Isn't that kind of a bit? Is it,
So I definitely understand the concern. And I think the only thing is that Chet plays much more physical than his stature is, and you
yeah,
can see that throughout the tape. Now, the real question, and of course, people get kind of hyperbolic with this stuff where they go, "How is he going to last against Anthony Davis? How
yeah.
is he going to last against Joel Embiid?" Well, those are some of the strongest dudes
That's in
in
in the
regular
league.
life, let alone
Yeah,
the NBA, right?
yeah,
So it's a really tough conversation to have, but it is something that's going to have to be taken into consideration if at some point he's going to be a part of what, if we're talking about Oklahoma City, right, is trying to build
yeah,
towards a championship roster at some
yeah,
point, right? Or
yeah,
a real playoff ready core.
yeah,
So it is something worth discussing. I think that we kind of have to see how his game translates. I think there's a lot of stuff off the ball, a lot of stuff on the ball that he can do. He's not a high maintenance player. And honestly, I think in his first year specifically, he's going to come out. I think he's going to be more of a defensive guy for Oklahoma City than he is going to be an offensive guy anyway. So I think what he's able to do on defense is going to tell us a lot about whether or not those quote unquote size deficiencies are going to really hinder him in the league. So it's a big game of cat and mouse. We're gonna just wait and see, I guess.
yeah, for sure. So yeah, we talked about the top three, but two more questions left for this episode.
Mhm.
Who do you think is going to be? Who do you think is the biggest sleeper this draft that no one is not really talking about?
Oh man, that nobody's really talking about is weird, but because like I think a lot of guys are starting to slowly gain steam like as we get closer. Okay, so the dude that I think is going to be really interesting draft night in terms, I'm going to pick two dudes, so I'm going to kind of cheat.
Yeah,
The guy who's been gaining a lot of steam that I think is just going to be interesting about where he lands is Jalen Williams out of Santa Clara. He's been a
yeah,
guy that's been gaining crazy steam towards the back end of March Madness into the NBA draft combine process, and he's a guy that significant wingspan, a guy that can do a lot with the ball, elite athleticism. He's going to be really interesting because I think he's a plug and play player regardless of the roster. But I think where he goes is going to be really interesting to see exactly what superstar guard or what potential core he's linked up with. On some of these draft boards, he's linked with Atlanta. Him as an off guard next to Trae Young could be really interesting in ways that I think we
yeah,
theoretically put a guy like Cam Reddish, for example. But I think
yeah,
Jalen Williams has a lot more upside in that kind of system next to Trae Young. The other guy that I'm going to keep an eye out on is Max Christie out of Michigan State. He did not have a great freshman year with Michigan State statistically, but Tom Izzo will yank you if you suck.
yeah,
Despite the fact that his statistics did not look good, this was a guy who was still granted the ability to play on the floor. If Tom Izzo saw something in him to the point that he was not yanking him off the floor, that is something to build upon. Christie is a
yeah.
guy who I think is going to shoot it at the next level, and he's a guy who I think if he puts on some weight, puts on some strength, might be a sneaky guy for the Miami Heat who just breeds dudes like that.
Yeah,
If
interesting.
he ends up in the right situation, he could be a dude who by like year 2 or 3 could be a real rotational guard for somebody that produces at a really high level. And we've seen benches matter, TV. We learned that
Yeah,
in the playoffs, dude. Benches really matter now.
yeah, for sure. Um, that's really good because, like, again, I don't know much of these guys, so I'll definitely keep an eye out on those two. The
Mhm.
only guy I'm like kind of keeping an eye on, and for some reason I'm not sure why he like went down a lot of people's draft boards compared to last year.
Mhm.
Jaden Hardy, he was like a
Yeah.
top 7, top 8 guy last year. I was keeping an eye on him a bit in the G League. I know his he didn't really show out much in the G
Mhm.
League compared to like what they were expecting from him. But I think that if there was something like really hyped up about him coming out of high school, it's gonna be interesting to see where he lands. It's gonna be
Yeah.
extremely interesting to see where someone like him lands. But the final question before this episode, I mean, the Chicago Bulls pinned in at I believe at the 18th pick, correct?
Mhm.
Who do you want him to draft at that position?
Now, TV, the truth, this is the Bulls fandom coming out. But the truth to me is that I think we're not going to use this pick. That's my
Oh, really?
truth. I think with as much as we've been rumored in conversations with guys like Rudy Gobert and DeAndre Ayton, I have this weird feeling that we are not going to be picking at 18 because I think that 18th pick is going to be required in order to get even a chance at being able to acquire either one of these guys in the offseason, especially Rudy Gobert, who's apparently been picking up a lot of steam with Chicago as of like the last couple of days even.
Yeah.
But if we have to take this pick, if we are using this pick at 18, I would really like EJ Liddell out of Ohio State. He's a guy who we just need more front court depth, honestly,
Yeah.
and we just need more size in general on our team. And he's a guy who really improved from last season to this season. He went to the NBA Combine last year, got a lot of notes about what he needed to improve, specifically his ability on the defensive end as an active guy and as a dude who really needed to improve on his three-point shot. And he did both of those things for Ohio State last season and really showed out as a guy who could be a post creator. He's really like it's weird. He reminds me of like Utah version Paul Millsap, but I think he has a little bit more defensive upside, which will be really good for a Bulls team that really showed out on the defensive end before all the injuries piled up. So EJ Liddell would be the guy for me. I was a big fan of him last year when I thought he was coming out. The fact that he's in this range this year shows that he's taken a really big leap to now being in that top 15, top 20 conversation as opposed to last year. He was a guy maybe scraping the bottom of the first round, early second round. If we could scoop EJ at 18, I think I would actually be pretty cool with that.
Interesting. And and I agree with you. If there's a trade for Aiden, if there's a trade for Rudy Gobert, I definitely see this trade going to either the Utah Jazz or the Phoenix Suns. But it honestly really does feel like that you guys are getting Rudy Gobert, and I think that could be very interesting, especially if Vucevic is included in that deal. I think that could be really interesting for a Chicago Bulls team which lacked all center depth last year, So that should be pretty interesting. We'll like to see if that's going to happen. As for myself, I actually had to I've been looking at a lot of Raptors workouts. I had to look around players that are potentially going to be in this, but honestly, my dream pick. I'm gonna go. Let's bring in another Canadian. Let's bring in Caleb Houston out of Michigan.
Okay, I like it.
I like Caleb Houston out of Michigan. 3-and-D guy. I think that the Raptors just need more of those type of players. I think he kind of fits the billing. 6'8", 6'9". Masai is salivating over those type of players. He has a history with Scotty Barnes. Apparently, they were good friends back in the day as well. They were talking about being in Toronto someday as well. I think that he would just be great. Firstly, for marketing, when we have Toronto guys or like guys from Canada and commercials, it's just absolutely fantastic, and just him getting all the hype alongside Delano Banton, alongside the Bouchers, the Kem Birches of the world. I think he would be a great pick. I know he doesn't lack the athleticism that kind of fits in with the rest of the team, but he has good size. I think he can improve with shooting the ball, especially under a Raptors team, which they're going to force you to shoot the ball. Trust me, he will shoot the ball. But he's around the 25 to 35 range, and like you mentioned earlier, there's going to be a lot of droppers and a lot of risers. So this guy could literally fall anywhere past probably 15. Who knows with this draft? But in a dream world, let's bring the Mississauga kid home. Let's bring in Caleb Houston. Let's see if the Raptors are able to pull it off, because I've seen him in the workouts. He feels like he wants to be here. I would be more than welcome to welcome a guy like Caleb Houston to the team, especially if we can get him in the second round. That would be pretty cool.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I think this is where we're going to end today's episode. Thank you guys for watching. Jalon, I'm going to throw it over to you. Where can they find you? And what do you have coming up?
Yeah, man. So TV, I actually kind of have to tease something. So I guess you'll kind of get this one. I've kind of mentioned this on podcasts in passing over the last couple of weeks, but it's going to get stamped this week. I'm actually changing all my social media stuff to The Knockdown J. The knockdownj.com will also be live this weekend too. Yeah. It's one of those things where now with the rebranding, we're going to really focus on posting out these videos, posting out highlight tapes and things like that. So that's going to be the new transformation for things. And in terms of written work outside of the knockdownj.com, j.com starting next week, I also am posting stuff on the BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com website for the NBA section. I always do NBA work for them at least once or twice a month. And now with the NBA finals being over, the NBA draft around the corner, and NBA free agency about to start, I'm going to be a little busy. So, yeah, you can expect a lot between the knockdownj.com and, of course, the BSLs too.
Of course, and I'll have all those links down in the description. You'll find Jalon out and all that stuff, because he's been on the show, good friend of the show. He has definitely been, like, especially with all the the daily NBA picks and stuff like that. We're definitely gonna start doing. We're gonna start doing that again next year. But he'll be on the podcast for sure in the future. He might even be on the one, about the top 10 pick with the top 10 players of all time. So who knows? But again, thank you, Jalon, for coming on, and you're always welcome to come back again. Definitely. But I think this is where we're gonna end today's episode. Thank you guys for watching. Remember to show love on all the podcast channels. Like, share, and subscribe on your YouTube. Remember to follow @TV on Basketball on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for updates on the podcast and for other great content. I'm gonna be back next week with the top 10 players episode. We're gonna have a couple of regulars on the show, and we're gonna basically just like what's gonna let it all out on the table and see what's gonna happen, who we have in our top 10. That should be a really fun episode, probably one of the most fun episodes on this channel. But besides that, just look out for TikTok, Instagram, all that stuff. You can see updates on that and more. But I want to thank you guys for all the support. Hope you all have a fantastic day. That's Jalon. This is TV. Take it easy, guys. Peace.